Hello, and welcome to this programme. This is the weekly Protest Podcast. On this week's show, we discussed sex abuse at Westminster. Will it bring down the government? And how many cabinet ministers will go before Theresa May leaves by the back door? We also talk about Brexit. Is it being discussed too much? And what issue would you bring to replace it in the running order? And finally, religion in education. Does it have a place in the modern age? This episode is titled The B Word and features the voices of Jack Wolfram, Django Barry and Thomas Jordan. So sit back, relax and enjoy today's programme. Hello, I'm Jack. Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. This was recorded on the 14th of November 2017 and I had Django Barry and the great Thomas Jordan in the studio to talk to me. We started off by talking about the issue of the sex abuse scandal at Westminster. Here is what they had to say. So this week hasn't been a particularly good week for the party leaders. We've seen Theresa May face cabinet resignations from Michael Fallon over comments he made. We saw Jeremy Corbyn face criticism, Carwyn Jones, in fact, the First Minister of Wales, over the dealing with the allegations in Wales. So do you think this scandal will be as big as the expenses scandal? Do you think it will have that much of an effect on Westminster and trust at Westminster?
As big as the expenses scandal, yes, but I don't think it will mean the complete collapse of the government or either parties. These cabinet resignations is not unusual. We had Peter Mandelson who got kicked out of Blair's cabinet twice, actually two Labour governments, basically the same one, and, over misconduct. And this week we've had two resignations from Theresa May's cabinet, Pradeep Patel and Michael Fallon, yes. But the two issues were actually unrelated. It doesn't show, in my view, that the time is nigh for the government. In my view, I think there's still enough time, and it is affecting both parties. This whole Sexminster scandal is affecting both parties, in my view, equally. The suicide of a Welsh minister is pretty big, along with two cabinet ministers resigning. So will it have the same effect as the expenses scandal? I think in the long term, yes, because it will change attitudes at Westminster towards women and towards behaving appropriately.
But do you think, Django, that it affects the stability of the government? Because the government aren't in a particularly good spot. They've got the DUP supporting them on certain votes, like things like the budget and confidence things, but other things, is up for negotiation. So if we see people like MPs losing the whip, who are getting the whip removed, who are no longer Conservative MPs, if you know what I mean, they're sitting independents, even if they do agree with a lot of Conservative policy, that means it's a lot more volatile for the government, and means that there's a risk that things may not go their way and cause even more embarrassment.
No, I wouldn't say that it's not unstable. I mean, we haven't had a specific Conservative MP since Grant Shapps back in October, who has actually given open dissent upon the government. There was the Plymouth MP who said, look, Theresa May's not looking too good at the moment. But as a whole, the DUP remains steadfast in their support for the Conservative government, and the cabinet as a whole is united.
So I'm going to bring in Tom. Tom, do you think Theresa May's working on borrowed time at this point?
Yes.
But why?
She's just running out of things to say. There's only so much you can do. I think what Theresa May and her government has got to remember is that a government is accountable to the people it represents. I think hopefully this scandal will put an end to MPs just doing and acting however they want. It probably won't. There's been scandals, as Django said, in the past, where life just carries on as normal, unfortunately. But hopefully this time will bring some change.
Yeah, that's why I believe that it will be similar to the expensive scandal in that there will be a change in the way MPs behave around women and treat the people around them.
But we've seen also that there has been calls for an independent standard to look over, code of conduct and employing of parliamentary staff. Like, let's say let's take the expenses scandal. What happened? We had the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority was created to look over people's expenses claims to make sure that government and Parliament wasn't measuring it itself and governing itself.
Both main party leaders have both said that they are eager for there to be an independent judiciary on this. I think it is dangerous when we get the parties to judge for themselves, because as has happened in the past, they may give advice more on the career aspects of the individual, the victim, rather than actually dealing with the fact that they were mistreated. So I think an independent parliamentary organisation to judge code of conduct for ministers and MPs would be very good and would be a good step in the right direction.
So, if we carry on with the idea of cabinet resignations, well, we've seen Priti Patel fall over her meetings with Israeli ministers and Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a lot of calls for Boris Johnson to go over the scandal with the Iranian prisoner. If you don't know, the Iranian prisoner, she was a mother of a child, and she's got a husband who is living in the UK at the moment, and she was over there on holiday. She works for Reuters, the journalist group, and she's been arrested for allegations of trying to bring forward an uprising going against the regime. And Boris Johnson has been quoted in Parliament in a committee saying that she was only trying to teach journalists. Do you think that a foreign secretary makes that kind of mistake? Do you think they should stay in the position of foreign secretary? Do you think he deserves to be in the government for that mistake that could even risk
well,
the
what I
lady
would
in
say,
question going to prison for even longer?
What I would say, Jack, is that it was a genuine mistake around what he did say. I'm not trying to defend that, and Boris has come out since then and said, I misspoke or / got the wrong pieces of information. But I read an interesting article in the Telegraph, which actually there was the Iranian husband, and the kid, the prisoner's husband, who's in the UK, he said that actually if Boris Johnson was to be kicked out, then it would potentially make the situation worse for the family. So it is a difficult situation, but I think the new media engagement with this situation is positive, because it has now moved their situation higher up on the agenda of the Foreign Office, and to be quite honest, I think we will see a solution come in due course.
So Tom, how many more resignations to go before Theresa May's out? I wanna guess. I want you to give me, how long do you think she's got? Do you think she's got to the budget? Do you think she's got a possible 5 years? Do you think any Conservative candidate, any MP, do you think they have the standing to become leader of the party?
I think she's got until the next election, to be honest.
Why?
Because, politicians can recover from these scandals. As we saw with Trump, he was accused of raping women and all that, and he went on to win the presidency. Like it or not, Theresa May is a very convincing person. She's a good politician. She can persuade people to
Can she?
I think so. Well, she won an election, just about. I think she'll last until the next election. I don't think she'll win it. Maybe they'll put in another candidate.
Alright, coming from a Conservative member, I can honestly say right now that Theresa May, she is a good leader, and she will lead us until the next election. I don't think she will lead us into the next election.
Yeah, I don't think she will.
Well, there's a recent
another,
article that came out on The Independent saying that there's 40 members of Parliament, Conservative members of Parliament, that are, telling her that she might have to go soon.
Yeah.
Because there's just scandal after scandal.
Yeah, that's 14.
Yeah, but it is. But most ministers and MPs are smart enough to know that, a lot of these scandals come from bad luck, really. I mean, the fact that the Westminster scandals came right before, like literally just before Priti Patel's scandal came. That is quite unfortunate luck. However, it's not fully down to luck, and I think after Brexit, she'll stay a year after Brexit or so, and it's at that point that it will. She'll be not kicked out, but a new leadership context will emerge in the Conservative Party.
So that was Django Barry talking about his experiences as a Conservative member. We then moved on to the issue of Brexit. Brexit, as Theresa May said. We talked about how Brexit may be discussed too much in the news media. And also, if we could be controller of any news channel and control what we put on the news, what issue would we put ahead of Brexit? And which issue do we think doesn't get enough airtime?
Excellent.
So now we come over to the issue of Brexit. It seems that every single time I turn on the news, I don't know about any of you two, Brexit's always the top story, with Theresa May going to summits to talk to European leaders, endless phone-ins on radio shows talking about Brexit and the effects. Do you think we are flogging a dead horse? Do you think we're talking too much about Brexit? I want to know. I'm going to start with Tom. Tom, as a rather pro-European, do you think we're talking too much about Brexit? Do you think that it's an important issue to discuss? Or do you think we're really just hashing out old arguments?
I think it's an important issue. It's the end of an era, really. We've been in the European Union for quite a while, and it's a big change. I think it deserves to be talked about. But I mean, there's other news. Brexit just seems to be something news companies fall back on if they haven't got any other stories. It's just something at the back of people's minds, which is just being preyed upon by media outlets, more or less unnecessarily. There's other stories, like it's not even the effects of Brexit people are talking about. It's the same stories going around and around. Like, it's just fear mongering, because fear mongering.
Well, there's lots of talks about negotiations, and to be honest, because negotiations aren't taking progress, all people seem to be talking about is the fact that negotiations, that they're not particularly making much progress. Django, as a Conservative member and as someone who supports Brexit and kind of from the beginning, and supported a campaign to leave the European Union, do you think we're discussing Brexit too much?
Well, I'll be completely honest. I think I would disagree that it's the top news story whenever I turn on the news. I'd say it's about 1 in 7 times that it might be one of the top news stories. But truthfully, I believe that there's not enough of a diversity of opinion right now regarding Brexit. We have any leaks that come out of the European Union regarding the talks are treated like gospel truth. They're treated as if this is absolutely true, even though it comes from a source that is questionable at best and unreliable at worst. And then when we have other opinions surrounding Brexit, then it's just labelled as wishful thinking. Like, for example, if Liam Fox goes on a show and says, our prospects coming out of the European Union and getting trade deals with other nations is extremely good.
I then asked Tom which issue is most important to him and is close to his heart that he would put ahead of Brexit in the news running order, and this is what he had to say. Tom, what do you see is the most important issue that we are ignoring?
Territorial integrity.
Why? Explain what you mean by territorial integrity.
We need to make sure that Britain and its borders and its airspace and its waters are protected and respected. Ooh, rhymes. Almost on a weekly basis. I've spoken to people in the Air Force about this. Russian bombers come over our airspace, just not dropping any bombs or anything else. I'd be like, big news. But they're just there, just to be aggressive. And whenever they come, our Eurofighters go up in the sky and escort them away again. But who foots the bill? It's an expensive procedure to do, to conduct the high-risk operation, which could potentially lead to a Third World War if either plane is shot down. And it's happening all the time, and Brexit just overshadows it. I think we need to put ourselves back on the world stage. We need to remind the world community that Russia, and maybe in the future China, when it becomes more powerful and expands its influence, will not walk all over us. We are being trampled by weak leadership.
Trampled?
Yeah.
Who's this weak leadership then?
The Tories.
So, what do you think we should do to increase ourselves on the make ourselves more important on the world stage? Are you not just engaging with the sycophants of the British, of our imperialist past, and that actually we're not actually in that position anymore, and we're really.
I know
quite
the whole
small.
point of the question is to avoid Brexit, but I think Brexit will contribute to this.
And I would say,
we'll remind the world that we trade with who we want. We're not ruled from Brussels, we're ruled from London.
And I'll remind
make our
us
own decisions.
all that whether or not it's we're not reminiscing about any kind of imperial time, the 19th century when we ruled a fourth of the world. We're not doing that. We have the fifth largest economy in the world. The fifth largest economy out of about 196 states and 2 server ones, I think. That's pretty big. And when we are getting disrespected by Russia's part of the Security Council, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. When we're getting disrespected by a Security Council member, I think that isn't brilliant. And I think the best way to combat this is not directly, but implicitly. So we build up closer ties with culturally similar countries, aka the Commonwealth. I think that is vital, that we build up a really close relationship, maybe with free trade but no European restrictions, with our fellow Canadians and our Australians and Indians and Jamaicans and New Zealanders.
So Django, finally, you've got a minute, less than that, to give me your one issue that you would bring that to if Brexit wasn't discussed in a day, for a day, what issue do you think personally is most important to you that is facing Britain at this current time?
I'd say possibly the most important issue. Sorry, it's probably foreign relations. What I just said. I think it is important that we now build up our foreign diplomacies and our diplomatic missions overseas.
Yeah, we're in safe
Okay,
hands
I'm
with
gonna challenge you on this. Don't you think also we should look at home relations as well? We've got a massive amount of poverty in the UK. We've got people who can't afford to feed their families. Do you think by focusing away from home, we're ignoring the problems at home?
No, I wouldn't. I think what we need to reflect on when we're talking about I think what we need. Sorry, I think what we need to reflect on when we're talking about poverty and all the rest of it is how have we gone to the situation where certain people are in such a situation that they can't afford to live, basically, which is poverty. And we need to realize, okay, so it was everyone cross-party agrees it is austerity. However, I believe that we've gotten our GDP per deficit. It was 10% when we came into office, and it's now below 3%, which is not at a critical level anymore. I think what we will see over the next couple of years is austerity slowed down and reinvestment in our welfare state, which I think is an important step into releasing people from poverty, and we will hopefully see that in the next 5 years.
So we finally decided to talk about the issue of religion in education. We wanted to make sure that we brought in a philosophical question, a question that may not necessarily be as topical as others. And we decided to discuss religion and whether it has a place in the classroom. So, our final issue of today's episode is about religion in education. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because the Church of England recently, I think it was only yesterday, the 13th of November, released a document entailing about how to deal with transgender students in Church of England schools, which triggered the question of the Church of England and Church of England and other religious groups have control of many a school in the UK. Do you think it's right for education to be controlled by religious groups? Tom, what do you think?
I don't think it is. I think the foundation of a liberal democracy is the separation of religion from state. I don't think it's right to teach children with a religious perspective which hasn't been decided by them. I think most religions agree that making the choice to follow a religion is a key part of it. As it says in the Bible, God has no grandchildren, which means, going full on RS, religion is not inherited. You can't be brainwashed or born into a religion unless you choose for that to happen.
So if we look at the French model, they have a secular society with a separation between church and state. We are very integrated. We have Church of England bishops that sit in the House of Lords. We have marriage ceremonies being performed within a church. So it's kind of ingrained in our culture. And France has seen problems also with this kind of secular attitude when it comes to things like Islam, when it was criticised for issues on the burqa, etc. Django, what do you think? Do you think that education benefits from religious intervention? Because if we look at it, historically, education, when it first was kind of being given for free, given to people, to the masses, it was given by churches at Sunday school. That was their main outlet of education. Is it just a historical continuation? Are we just kind of we don't want to face up to the fact that religion doesn't have a place in education, or do you think it plays an important role?
I don't believe it plays as vital a role as it did 300 years ago, say in Paris, classic French Revolution knowledge right here. They 60% of Parisians could read by the time of the French Revolution, and that was due to the free schools provided by the church, the clergy, educating the masses. However, nowadays we don't need that. We have a state-funded education system which does work actually quite really well compared to other countries in the world. And all in all, I think the problem that the risk we have with having a church control education for, say, a school or anything, they could potentially, and I'm not blaming the Church of England for this, but potentially indoctrinate children into a way of thinking and not encourage free thought. And then there's the question of whether or not primary school children even have much free thought at all. But I think what's important is we allow them to develop individually and without the restraints of a philosophy that over the past 100 years has died down. And I think this is the same with any religion. I think it's the same with Islam as well. I don't think there should be Islamic schools. I don't think there should be Christian schools. I think there should just be schools.
So if I use my primary school background, I went to a religious school. I went to a school that was Church of England. It was kind of liberal, and but it was a very white-dominated area with very white-dominated pupil intake, very Christian intake. So there's many in your party, Django, in the Conservative Party, that do believe in Christian education and believe that it gives people the right values. But my question, would you, if you were in government, if you were advisor to Theresa May or to the Education Secretary or to any member of the government, would you advise them to scrap Church of England schools or scrap religious educational establishments, or do you think you can put up with them?
I think reform. I think to go from something where religious schools is so great in our societies and great by the size, I have several friends who went to religious primary schools, to just say we're going to scrap them, you would be taking in so much on the education system that your funding would have to go up. It would be it would hurt my brain. I don't think scrapping it would work, and I think that was a good point you raised. They do teach good morals, but you can teach good morals in a state school. It's not limited to a church school. I know many of my party may disagree with me, but I do have my own opinions on this, and I don't believe that church schools will be as relevant in the 21st century as the 20th century, and slowly their influence will die out and will take over the schools.
So Tom, you don't particularly like church being involved in education, religion. So with the crisis we have in government funding, education is not being funded compared to the levels compared to where it was, let's say, 10 years ago under the Labour government. And the whole point is we have a deficit and we have a large amount of debt. Do you think that education is a necessity for religion to have involvement in education? Because what it does is it gives it releases the burden, as Django said, from other schools because if we scrap them, that would cause a lot of burden on the education system. Do you think they're a necessity for our current system, where money isn't going into education, to give church schools, give church authorities to build more schools, because otherwise we wouldn't get any more schools and we wouldn't have enough school places?
Wait, are church schools paid for by the government?
So they're partly government funded, but they also have funding by church schools. For example, the primary school I went to was a local authority school, but now it's become an academy, a sponsored academy. And what's happened is so in Bristol you have the Bristol Diocese of Bristol, where I used to live, where I live now. We have the Diocese of Bath and Wales, and Bath and Wales took over the school and made an academy trust. So they take the burden from government and they look after the school.
I think I have no issue with a church paying for a school. But
you just said you have no issue with church paying for a school, but then again,
but it being a church school is the problem. I work in a primary school, and it is a religious school, but it is paid for by the government. And a lot of the people I work with are incredibly influenceable. Is that a word? Influenceable? They could be
influenced easily.
Yeah, easily influenced. And I think to have a single-minded religious authority telling them more or less what to think would be incredibly damaging. I think, as it's Christian, and most people have been brought up in a Christian community, I don't think there's too much issue. But when people think about foreign countries like Saudi Arabia or Yemen, church and state is intrinsically interlinked, and they have large amounts of people going in their droves to become terrorists because religion is such an important part of our life. When you have one person telling a group of children
a distorted
from a
part
young
of that religion.
Yeah, it's not the majority. But when you have one person telling a group of easily influenced young people what to think, it's going to have damaging results.
Well, thank you very much for joining me. I've been Jack Wilfan, your host for this podcast. I've been joined here by Django Barry, the Conservative member, and also Thomas Jordan, who is just an independent voice with a very big opinion. Thank you very much.